Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about graphing basic sine and cosine functions. So we have our equations. The basic equations have an a value of 1 and a b value of 1. So if you don't see anything here or here, then they're an understood 1. Otherwise, we have a and b in the same spot for both functions. Sine functions, we're just going to do a basic graph. So sine functions start at the origin for 0, 0, and then they make an S, sideways S. And this is sine. For cosine, cosine starts at a y value other than 0. And we'll talk about what that is in a little bit. So I'm going to start up here. And then they go like this and kind of look like a fancy V or a fancy U. And this is cosine. All right, the amplitude. The amplitude is the absolute value of A. It's the height of your graph. So if this is my graph, then what this is saying is whatever, if this is the top of your graph and this is the bottom, whatever that distance is, half of it is your amplitude. So the amplitude is the height, or you could say that it's the height from the x-axis. You will want to make sure that you remember that. Memorize it probably would be a good idea. And then the formula for the period is 2 pi over b. Now remember in the formulas in the previous slide, we had a and b. And so that's where we're pulling these a and b values to find the amplitude and the period. Talking about, if we go back to maybe you've learned about sound waves. So they have patterns like this. A period is where you have one cycle in that pattern. So this red right here is one cycle of the pattern that I drew. And then this repeats that pattern. And this repeats that pattern. So one cycle, one period is the very first start to stop of that pattern. Looking at these equations, then, we're going to find the amplitude and the period of each function. So remember, amplitude comes from A, and period comes from B. This A value is 1. So for our amplitude, we get the absolute value of A. The absolute value of 1 is 1. That's our amplitude. Then for the period, we plug in the B value to the equation. So we have 2 pi over 1/5. We'll discuss using our calculators for this tomorrow, but remember we never divide fractions. So rather than 2 pi divided by 1/5, this is 2 pi times 5 over 1. which gives us a period of 10 pi. A and B. So our amplitude is the absolute value of 4, which is 4. And our period is 2 pi over B. B is 1. So 2 pi over 1 is 2 pi. Number 3, amplitude and period. So amplitude comes from A, the absolute value of 2/3 is 2/3. And then our period, 2 pi over B, which is 1, 2 pi over 1 is 2 pi. Number 4, we have A and B. So our amplitude is the absolute value of 2, which is 2. And our period is 2 pi over B. There's nothing more I can do to simplify 2 pi over 3. So that is our period, or 1 cycle. Number 5, we have A and B. So for our amplitude, the absolute value of 5 is 5. And the period, 2 pi over 1/2, which is 2 pi times 2 over 1, or 4 pi. So our period is 5. Our amplitude is 5, and our period is 4 pi. This last one, we have our A, and our B is 1. So for our amplitude, we have the absolute value of -3, which is 3. And our period is 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. Graphing. So we're starting with finding the amplitude and the period of your function. And then these steps 2 and 3, can be done using this pattern. So sine always has the pattern of 0, amplitude, 0, negative. Let's go ahead, sorry about that, make that a negative amplitude right here, 0. And then cosine is amplitude 0, negative amplitude 0a. That's the pattern in general for both of the graphs. And then here, make sure when you connect your dots, these are not V's, they are curves. So they should have a little flowy, curvy, wavy type deal when you connect them. All right, so we're going to start with, we have amplitude and period. So our amplitude is 3. And then our period, 2 pi over 2, which simplifies to 1 pi. So because my amplitude is 3, on the y-axis I need to go up 3 and down 3. On my x-axis, I will always have 4 points that I will need to have. What will change is how these points are labeled. So because our period is pi, our fourth point here has to be pi. And then you need to label at least one more point. So halfway between pi and 0 is half pi. This is sine. Sine starts at 0. So we have 0, A, 0, negative A, 0. And then our curvy graph. Number 8. Our amplitude is 4. And our period, B is 1. Anyway, so for a period, we would then have 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. Our y-axis then has to go from 4 to negative 4 for our amplitude. We still have our 4 hash marks on our graph, and because our period is 2 pi, this fourth one is 2 pi. Remember, you have to mark at least one more, so half of 2 is 1, so our middle mark is 1 pi. Cosine starts at A, so cosine is going to start at 4. So we have A, 0, negative A, 0, A. And remember, it's not a V, it's a curve, so make sure it's curvy. Example 9. So our amplitude is 2, and our period, so again, we're 2 pi over B, which reduces to 1 pi. So if our amplitude is 2, then our graph needs to go from positive 2 to negative 2. And our period is pi, so our fourth hash mark is pi, 1 pi. Half of 1 is a half, so 1/2 pi is in the middle. And I'm graphing. Now remember, this is where we start our A. Cosine starts at A. So cosine here is starting at negative 2, 0, 2, 0, negative 2. That's a reflection. Number 10. So our amplitude is 3. The 1/2 gives us our B for our period. So our period is 2 pi over 1/2, which becomes 2 pi times 2, or 4 pi. So our period is 4 pi. Our graph has to go from 3 to negative 3, and our 4 hash marks go to 4 pi. Again, find the middle part. Half of 4 is 2. That's 2 pi. Sine starts at 0 at the origin, and then it goes 0a. Well, our first a is negative 3. 0a, 0, negative A, 0. Curvy line, and there's one period of our graph. Number 11, A is 4, amplitude is 4, B is 1/2, so we just did that, our period is going to be 4 pi. So our y-axis has to go from 4 to negative 4, and then our x-axis goes out again to 4 pi. Halfway is 2 pi. Again, cosine starts at A. Cosine starts at A. A is positive 4, so we're up here at positive 4, 0, negative 4, 0, positive 4. Curvy line. All right, so part of your homework points for tomorrow or Friday will be number 12, number 14, and number 15. Finding amplitude and period from a graph. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to find our first hill or valley and count from the x-axis either up or down. So our first hill in this one is going up 1, 2, 3. So our amplitude is 3. The period, remember, you count 5 points. So I'm going to change colors here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the period is 4 pi. Last but not least, is it sine or cosine? Remember, sine starts at 0, 0. So since this graph starts at 0, 0, this is a sine function. All right, our first hill is right here. Looks like it's going halfway between 0 and 1. So our amplitude is 1/2. We're going up first, so it's positive 1/2. For the period, remember we're counting 5 points from our y-axis. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this right here is 1 period. Well, how do I figure out what that is? Well, out here is 2 pi, and this got split up into 4 parts. This one is halfway between 2 and 0, so half of 2 is 1 pi. Our period is 1 pi. Then we're asking, is this sine or cosine? Well, it doesn't start at 0, 0. So this is a cosine graph. I'm going to jump down to example D. This distance right here is 1, 2, 3, 4. Excuse me. So our amplitude is positive 4, positive because we go up first. Then we count our 5 points starting at the y-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this right here is 1 period or 1 pattern. So how do we figure out where that is? Well, here's 2 pi. So halfway between that, this line is 1 pi, and the line that we are looking at is, it looks like halfway between 1 and 0. So that should be pi over 2, because half of 1 is a half. So our period is pi over 2. And then we start here at the origin. So that is a sine graph. All right, let's go with example E there. So our distance going up from our very first hill, it looks like it goes to 1. It's up 1, so A is positive, our amplitude is 1, and our A value would be positive 1. For the period, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is 1 period at this line. That line is halfway in between 2 and 0. So that's going to be 1 pi. And you can just write pi or 1 pi. That's up to you. And then this is not starting at 0, 0. So it is a cosine function. All right, this is where we're going to stop for today. We will continue on in class tomorrow. Have a great night.